Car crashes happen all the time. When an airplane crashes, you got to talk about it anywhere in the world if it's big. When a ship crashes, you got to talk about it. When a submarine crashes, the entire world will talk about it.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Tracer Burnout. I'm Roger.
And I'm Dan.
Dan, we've been doing this show for well over a year now. We could say a year and a half. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And there is one creature that has eluded us to this point. We've talked Yeah, go ahead.
Well, a few. We have a few white whales in the water, but we do get to slay one today.
We do indeed. The elusive creature, of course, of which we speak would be a submariner. I don't know. We're about to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, we introduce you to Ross Rusty Orvik. How you doing today, brother?
Just fine, Roger. Just fine, Dan. I'll correct that first one. Submariner, even though some of those other ones sound better. We've all got our ways for how we do our talk and walk our walk, and submariner is our term. Over.
Perfect. So it's been explained to me one time many moons ago that the Brits say the inverse of that. Is that correct? Do you happen to know?
Well, if I were going to talk in Brit and be aluminium and down the way, and I don't know, this is an American way of saying it. And when I hang out with my British counterparts, they have submarines too. Their boat, their rules. We'll just keep it Americanized for this one.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, Brits don't even speak English either, so.
Queen's English. Some of your viewers are in the UK, but we'll apologize to some of those.
Well, they give a hearty "oi" whenever we say things like that. So
got it.
So Dan, we found our submariner in Arizona of all places.
Yes, Arizona. So, Rusty, we'll get started the same way we always do. Does your family have a history of service? Tell me that your family has a history of submarining.
I'll be the first submariner in the family, but prior to that, three generations. My grandfather wanted to sign up on December 8th, the day after the day which will live in infamy. He had too many diving accidents. He couldn't hear it all. So he lied to the recruiters, went down to the recruiting station, tried to sign up. Doctor didn't believe him, said, okay, just walk down that hallway. And when I say stop, you stop. Doctor says, stop. My grandfather keeps on walking. So he was 4F, but he wound up manufacturing lenses and crystals for battleships. The grandfather on my in-law side, my wife, he was with the 13th Armored Division. So he was with those black cats rolling through Europe. His VFW chapter became my VFW chapter in California. His American Legion chapter became mine. Best thing is you walk in there and you don't walk into some VFW and they say, hey, that's Art Gaskin's grandson. The legacy there. My father was born in 1934. And if you can do the numbers, that means when he's eligible for the draft, the Korean War is just ending. So he misses Korea. This bothers him. He signs up for the Air Force Reserve. So he goes to school, works his way through school, and then wants to serve his country. Of course, by the time they discharge him, he's too old for Vietnam. And then neither of those people wanted to go underwater. But for me, that's where I wanted to head. It was mysterious to me. The Cold War was, well, we were in that Cold War, and I wanted to be on that front lines as part of it. Brings me here today.
So when did you join the service? And I mean,
I joined.
Obviously, you just said that the underwater mystery of the Cold War and stuff like that, but why the Navy?
The Navy is the only place that had submarines. That's what I wanted to do. If I wanted to go fly a plane, you can join the Coast Guard and fly a plane. You can join the Army and fly a plane. If I wanted to go shoot a machine gun, I can find those anywhere. And the machine gun time is fine. Hopefully we got some time to talk about me and my tracer burnout, because good, exciting episode. The only place you can run a Navy, unless you're going to be smuggling narcotics, would be with the United States Navy. So that's where I was going. I signed up when I was 1989 out of high school, did the papers, and the recruiter looked at my paperwork, and then they noticed that I got into college, and they made me a pretty good deal. They said, well, you got into college and you want to join the Navy. We'll make you a deal. If you can get your grades up, and if you can run really fast, and if you can bulk up a bit, And if you can have good, outstanding moral character, I didn't know what that was because I was 17, but we all figure it out. Then maybe we'll bring you onto a roll. So I signed up for the ROTC program in San Diego. They got an interesting way of doing this. They send you to boot camp first. So I'm that old where recruit training command was in San Diego or Orlando or Great Lakes. So I got to spend a little bit of time there, just like everybody else who starts out boot camp. Picked up the grades, ran really fast. I don't think I could run that fast now. And they said, congratulations, we will make you a midshipman, the Navy's version of officer candidate or cadet. Keep your grades up, get really smart. We want you to think about nuclear power. And that's how they bring officers into the submarine corps.
Okay. So where did you go to school?
I did my undergraduate at the University of California at San Diego. The good thing about San Diego is they have submarines there. You had a really good chance to get underwater on your spring break or your summer vacation and make sure that was what you really wanted to do. It's a big commitment, whether you're an infantryman or a PJ or a tanker. We're all fond of our jobs and our careers. I had the chance to go underwater a lot of times before I signed that final paper, and they send you off for this interview with a 4-star admiral, and that's how Navy nuclear power hires its people.
What I assume they would have initiated your security clearance pretty early for that too, yes?
They do it pretty early. We talked about upstanding moral character and that 17-year-old that didn't know it. By the time I was done with what they call orientation, in air quotes, at boot camp, I understood character. You know, keep your nose clean, do your paperwork, and the submariners will have some of the highest security clearances they have. I'm sure they're plenty higher, but you know what? I don't need to know it. Some of your viewers probably say, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I believe you. If I needed to know what I needed to know, I did.
You're 17 years old and somebody explains to you that you're part of the nuclear triad, and your response is?
Is that a triangle? Is that a square? Is that a triad? You know?
Yeah. That would have been me at 17 too.
So when you were going through your ROTC and they were, letting you go on the sub and underwater and stuff so that you could make sure that it's the right call for you, what sort of stuff were you doing?
To be candid, most of the submarine crew is not interested in anybody showing up who is not fully qualified to work. If you are a newbie or a noob, all you're doing is breathing the air that someone else could be breathing, eating the food somebody else could be eating, and occupying space. And space is at a premium. To answer your question, what are we doing? We're trying our best to be something moderately useful. And if that means we're going to clean, we're going to clean. If that means we're going to take notes, we're going to take notes. You get a chance to do all of the stuff on the submarine, like drive the submarine. For your pilot type, seashells get bigger, seashells get smaller, same type of idea. You get to work on the reactor and the plant. You get to work with the pumps and the tanks and the valves and the electronics. You're not there long enough to know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing on a submarine, you are dangerous. You are a liability.
Yeah.
So to finish the story, trying not to make people angry and to learn as much as possible so that when it's finally your turn, they don't need to retrain you as much.
That's pretty good attitude and approach for most things in life, particularly high risk ones.
Yeah, except if you wander off or you're not where you're supposed to be. My first nickname on the sub was Orphan. My name is Orvik, but where's little orphan Orvik? He was off running around trying to learn something. You learn quickly that if you get a nickname, it's usually not a good nickname. It's not like, some positive call sign. And I tried not to be an orphan the second time I was on my second submarine.
Fair. So you commission as
1993.
Okay, so this is the very, 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 the Cold War's just ended, really. So this is the peace dividend. So it's kind of a brave new world in the early 90s at this point. So what's your first assignment?
My first assignment is nuclear power school. That's where they send people who said, I want to go run these submarines, go into water. Say, great. We're sending you to a classroom, not even close to a submarine first. You're going to do that for around 6 months. And then that's Orlando, Florida. I'm that old. We just have a base in Orlando, Florida. And then they're going to send you to a nuclear prototype, which is a nuclear reactor not attached to a ship in the water. Think like all those things when you're learning how to drive, like parallel parking and merging on the freeway and learning how to accelerate and come to a stoplight. They don't want you doing any of that on your first reactor. So it's like
Yeah.
a car that's just not going anywhere. You're going to start the car, you're going to stop the car, you're going to shift gears on the car, but the parking brake's always engaged. That nuclear prototype is in Charleston, South Carolina for me, which is now the home of the U.S. San Francisco. Instead of SSN, submarine nuke, it is now MTS, moored training ship. So my boat, or what's left of my boat, is now a prototype in South Carolina. Getting back to my story, after you're done learning how to operate nuclear power in school and in the reactor itself, they'll send you to submarine school. That is always in Groton, Connecticut. That's the home of the submarine force, has been, still is now. You're going to learn finally how a submarine dives, how it surfaces, how it fights, how sonar works, how a cruise missile works. After you're done with all that, they will send you out to your first assignment. Mine was this boat, and at the time, she was in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And Hawaii for a duty station? I'm sure I'm not your first guest who really appreciated his time in the islands.
So would you say that from the time that you were in ROTC and you were doing your summer, boat tours, trying not to, screw things up really, was that time helpful when you finally did get to your first assignment?
Absolutely. That's like going to the minor leagues before you go to the major leagues. That's like doing Cub Scouts before you do Boy Scouts, or going to junior high before you go to high school. By no means do you know everything that you're doing, but my days of being Little Orphan Orvik were over by the time I got to work. They had other nicknames for me. I'm sure you're going to pull them out of me, but at least I knew where to keep out of the way, how to try to be a positive asset, and the
Not be
right
a
mental
liability.
attitude. There you go. Absolutely.
So, what kind of to get more into the training that you took along the way before you got to your boat in Pearl Harbor? Do they, and maybe this is part of the ROTC as well, but I mean, I imagine there's got to be some sort of training to get you used to going so far underwater and resurfacing, and like what that does to your body, like physical conditioning or something like that, right?
They have a bunch of tests. There's a lot of batteries. Some of them are psychological, some of them are physical. The weirdest part for me was when you go through a polygraph. Some of us call that a lie detector in commonplace terms. It's not really a lie detector, but I'm not used to having all these electrodes on my head and all of these stickers on my heartbeat, and I'm down in some basement with some guy with glasses scrawling this clipboard, ask me questions like, where was I born, and what's 3 plus 3, and like, what's the capital of whatever. And I'm thinking, these questions are easy. Could I have all of my military tests be like, because I just got 100% on that. What they don't tell you is they're just recording how you physiologically act and sweat and blink and pulse and breathe when you're just telling the truth. What they're really trying to find out is if you're lying, what's going to spike first. And these people are pretty good at their job. Though,
Yeah.
As part of those security clearances, you got to be relatively trustworthy. And there's some people there that really shouldn't be that close to nuclear reactors or nuclear weapons, and maybe we can find another job for you. There's plenty of jobs in our line of work. We got 3 different stories right here, but they try to condition you for that, and they'll try to screen you out ahead of time. One of the things a lot of your viewers are going to ask about the spaces, for people say, hey man, I got claustrophobia. Do they screen for that? The answer is yes, but it's not perfect. There was one time where I am down inside the tanks of the submarines, and we have a bunch of them. This tank is called the potable water tank. And by definition, that's where you drink out of. So if you're going to a drinking fountain or you're taking a shower, that water comes out of potable water. Of course, when they clean it and paint it and prime it, you have to inspect it because, well, we're the military. We'll inspect everything, and we'll probably inspect it twice. When you send somebody into a tank, you never send them alone. That's a bad place. You can get lost, cold, and dark. They send 2 people. The person going with me is starting to stress out and really experience some things I am not used to. This person must have not been honest on their polygraph when it comes to claustrophobia. And I'm having someone experience claustrophobia with me in the tank. And that does not come as part of your nuclear power training or your military training. How do you deal with someone all of a sudden experiencing fear that they cannot describe and a palpitation they cannot describe? But you know what? A lot of us are combat veterans. It kind of comes with the trade.
Yeah.
Getting him gently out of the tank and then helping him find another job. Great guy. It's just you all of a sudden you put him in somewhere cold and dark and confined, and the only thing he can feel is me. This is just not his line of work. So some of this is trial and error. We make an attempt to get that out of the way before they send you out to work. Sometimes the sailors can surprise you, as we
In that
usually
one
do.
example you just gave, I mean, were y'all in dock when that
Yes.
happened, or were you okay? So you're not like sitting on the ocean floor when this is all going down. Okay, all right.
You can a submarine can absolutely sit on the ocean floor. You want to do that carefully. You have the right things sticking out, not the wrong things sticking out. The
Right.
potable water tanks, you will usually keep those empty when you're at shore because you can ring up a kind of envision like a garden hose that you hook up to your RV. It's much more cleaner than a garden hose, but you can pump in other water from the shore. There are tanks that you can get into when you are underway. Usually you do most of that tank work when you are pulled up and safe next to the pier.
So, what are some of the physical things they take you through to prepare you for extended durations deep below the surface?
They get you wet. They get you really, really wet. What we call in the submarine, our main mission is to keep water out of the people tank. Yeah, you got a fish tank with
I like
fish in it. You
I like
got
that.
it's a people tank. That's all it is, and we're breathing air. It's a semi-autonomous reflex. I don't need to tell you, Dan, to breathe. You're just doing it. Now they tell you and your viewers are thinking about it. Gee, am I breathing properly? Well, you got to keep on breathing if you're an air-breathing organism like we humans. And so they train you what happens when the water comes in. Remember, we'll probably get to talking about how you fight as a submariner, but all we're really trying to do in the submarine for the other guy or the other girl is to let the water in. If the water comes in, especially deep down at pressure, it's going to cause a lot of chaos very quickly. So you get to spend some time where they'll run you through a simulated room with a bunch of tanks, with a bunch of pipes, and all of a sudden water starts spraying out. And then it sprays out more. And the people running this control system, they're working with these rookies. I'm one of those rookies, but they got you on camera. You know, give them the number 4, give them the flange. Not enough. Give them the flange. Just spray Orvik more. And like you just envision water flying all over the place. You've got your wrenches. They've trained you. You've got your bandit kits, which kind of looks like a band-aid, but it's a metal band-aid, right? With a rubber backing. You've got your shoring. Shoring are pieces of wood that you can pound and go. That's very old fashioned. Would you believe we can still fight flooding on a ship the same way we've been fighting it for centuries with wood and hammers? They get you wet, and you got to work as a team beating that trainer. Now, if you can put enough patches on the leaks, the pressure on the trainer will increase. So envision you got this leak, and you cover it, leaks and sprays a little more, then it drip, drip, drip. The people in the control booth, they know how much pressure you're cranking up to. And if you can get to, past pressure, you have beaten the trainer. The staff will come in later and they'll take that up to an 11. But
Of course.
they're just practicing. There have been a couple times where I've seen that water come in the people tank on the submarine. Actually, twice. And both of those times, you have one of those. We've all, most of us have had in the military.
Mouth agape. Yes.
I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die right now. I'm gonna die today. And in my case, unfortunately, for the Navy chief petty officers, we always learn to ask the chiefs, the training kicks in. I will credit Chief Pulliam, wherever he is, electronics chief mate, electrician, and machinist mate Chief Queen, the chiefs who were there when the water came into the submarine and they knew exactly what to do. And I was just delighted. Everybody in the Navy knows that you should just ask the chief. The chief knows what to do and they spring into action. And you're just so delighted we have those salty dogs with dozens of years of experience that know the exact right widget to put the exact right hole or the exact right thing to turn such that the water stops coming in the people tank. And when that happens, you go from like this to that incredible sigh of relief when no more water is coming in the tank. Of course, you got that water down, and we call the bilge, the bottom of the boat.
It's the
now
lowest
you got
part.
Yeah, it's the lowest part. But remember, submarine's got to move. So sometimes that lowest part becomes a little different. We go up, we go down. There's a lot of rotation and elevation and declination in the submarine. Anyhow, you get wet. And I'm glad I got wet early on in my training because when you really get wet, now all of a sudden it becomes a life or death moment.
Interesting. So your first assignment, you're a ensign, yes?
Yeah, the Navy the entry level management, the officer that really doesn't know much about anything, but you're still a commissioned officer. We call them ensigns, second lieutenant in the other services.
So on a nuclear sub, as the junior most officer on that craft, on you wouldn't call it a ship. You would.
She's still a USS. It's going to be, sorry,
Yeah, yeah,
over on
yeah.
this side,
Okay.
United States. She's still a ship. We affectionately refer to it as a boat. People on aircraft carriers will also refer to that as a boat. People on cruisers and destroyers and minesweepers, they won't use that word. But submariners and aircraft carriers will call the ship affectionately a boat. She's
Gotcha.
absolutely a ship.
Gotcha. So you're the junior most officer on this pretty significant ship. What kind of duties do you have on a day-to-day basis, either in training or when you're out at sea?
You remember that first part? I was talking about being 17 and 18 in summer vacation, spring training,
Yep.
and like keeping out of the way. I would first of all say, of your 3 jobs, one of them is keep out of the way of the people who really need to do what they're doing. And that is, regardless of your pay grade, E1 through O9, sometimes keeping out of the way is the right answer, because there's not a lot of room to get in someone's way and wreck someone's day on the submarine. Having said that, your other 2 jobs when you first show up on the boat as an officer are going to be leadership. They're going to give you some leadership and accountability of some small group of sailors, and then learning your job, learning your watch station. Everybody on the submarine needs to pull their weight. They will stand their watch. For the officers, there's usually 2 positions. They'll be accountable for everything that happens in the back. That's where the nuclear reactor is. That's where the propeller is, or the screw, or the propulsor. We have a bunch of different ways to make the ship go forward. In the back is a lot of the other machinery that makes the water, that makes the electricity, all those things that we just kind of take for granted up among the surface dwellers. In the front of the ship, the person who has the accountability of the ship when she is underway is the officer of the deck. And that
Mm.
officer of the deck is going to be accountable to the commanding officer on a ship that's always called the captain, regardless of the rank of the man or the woman who's in charge. That is the captain. So those 3 things: keep out of the way, meet your people, learn a detailed small sliver of the ship, and become a professional watchstander so that you can do what I described earlier, not just be breathing air, not just be eating food, contributing to the positive safety, security of the ship, and then later her mission effectiveness.
How many people at average, I guess, because nobody ever has the full complement, right? How many people are on the sub?
The American submarines have around 115, north of 115,
It's more
up
than I
to
thought.
130. The even bigger ones have even more, and they have space. Sometimes, to answer your question, Dan, you never have the full complement. You're right. We don't hire and recruit in the military just for spares, just in case of backups. We may have spare equipment. We don't necessarily have spare people. It's funny that depending on the mission, you may have more of what you think you need, but it's not about what you think, it's what you need. If you're going to be tasked for missions of national security, it's how many language speakers or how many interpreters or how many radar people we think you need for the mission that you're about to go.
Yeah.
So these things are big, but they're really stocked with equipment. And when they're stocked with equipment, they're not necessarily stocked effectively. We're making a cylinder. Remember, most fish are kind of cylinder in nature, and our submarines look like cylinders. But we're not very good with how we build cylinders or spheres. We kind of build like squares, and we fit boxes into a cylinder, and that creates all this room on the outside, and that outside is going to get tucked with food, or tucked with extra clothes, or tucked with blankets, or cleaning materials. My first dissatisfaction is, no matter how much space is at a premium, there's always room for cleaning materials and always room to clean. You can never clean enough. My spouse, my kids probably don't like that I took my cleanliness habits from my military service and brought them into my post submarine
You make
career.
your kids buff the floors? I love that. That's awesome.
We call it swab the deck in our line of work. But when I was done with the military, we had some friction. You know what? There's aside, there's a lot of things that are important when you finally take that uniform off. The three of us have taken that uniform off. There's always a time when it goes away, and that's a big change, especially if you have a spouse and kids. And I'm proud to say the spouse and I went through a lot of transition therapy and counseling. We are not afraid to say this is a big shift. Let's get some help. Because when I had one of the fights with the kids and he said, "You're not in the military anymore." Well, you're right. I can't, I never really should have given an order to my kids, but especially not now.
Yeah.
It's an important point.
There is an old retired, I guess it would be like a museum vessel now, out there in with it. It's overshadowed by the USS Yorktown. So before you go up that gangway to the Yorktown, there's off to the side, there's a very small submarine that you can go into first. I cannot imagine fitting more than like Roger and I and my son went into it. This was several years ago. And I mean, Roger and I are, 6 foot or over. And I mean, we were crammed in there. And I cannot imagine getting even 30 people into that vessel. I can't imagine getting 120, 130 into a nuclear. Granted, I haven't been on a nuclear sized vessel, but man, that is wild. That you'd be crammed in there tighter than sardines.
I'm glad you brought that point up, though, about the historic submarines that you can tour and visit. And it's not just next to the Yorktown. They're in a lot of places. They're in San Francisco.
Well, the one that
Pearl
we
Harbor.
went to was right there.
Great. Well, what I would encourage for your viewers is if you can get on one of those old boats, do two things. One, go there because it's right out of the movies. They haven't changed anything. And then two, give some satisfaction, give some thanks. I think I brought to the volunteers. They wear stuff like this. This is what I wear when I am volunteering, working on the boats of the cruise. Give them some thanks because keeping those things afloat after 70, 80 years of service is not easy. Some appreciation would be wonderful. I'd ask you to donate some money too. It doesn't go to me, it goes to the cause. But keep those museums up and floating. They not just recruit people, they give you a time capsule on what it was like. And things haven't changed that much. What we typically find is things get smaller, like your computers got smaller and smaller. And now you can do a lot with your smartphone that you couldn't do on the space shuttle. And you would think we're smart government people. We've got a computer that was this big and now it's this big. Let's put in a gym, or let's put in a PlayStation, or let's put in a pull-up. No, if you make something smaller in a submarine, they're going to fill with more fuel or more food or more weapons.
More cleaning stuff.
Yeah, well, I shouldn't completely. There's a couple command master chiefs on the submarine. We call them chief of the boat, affectionately known as Cobb. And there's probably one or two Cobbs that are watching this and say, Orvik is still complaining about cleaning. Fair enough. Fair enough. My easiest thing when it's time to clean is just start cleaning. We have people that are entry level that do largely cleaning, and they have people in supervisory roles that are supposed to be supervising cleaning. I didn't see a lot of point in supervising other people cleaning. In fact, I found that generated significant amounts of resentment. I found the easiest thing for me is just start cleaning, right? If you're cleaning, you're cleaning. I could supervise cleaning, but if I pick up a swab and start swabbing, or if I just pick up some brass cleaner and start cleaning, it'll just get done faster. That worked for a while. What I figured out is maybe a lot of you, when I went to Camp Pendleton for some Marine training and clean my weapon, I found out my weapon was never clean enough. If the trigger wasn't good, or if the guard wasn't good, the stock wasn't good, the gunny could always say, just run her finger and say, see all this finger's clean now. But envision that, we're going along the slide of the weapon. You just run out of time for cleaning. Still, when the time for cleaning was done, it was cleaner because I'll just pick up a swab and start going. That actually helps with post-military, with the spouse and the kids. I don't say, hey, kids, go clean. I say, we are going to clean. And then all of a sudden, at least they can't say, well, you're not cleaning. Like, I'm the guy doing the dirtiest work there.
Yeah.
Cleaning.
You mean leadership? Perish the thought, right?
By example.
Okay, so you graduated from school in '93?
I'm that old.
Yeah. So how you you went through all your training, the sub training, the nuclear propulsion training, all that stuff. Then you got out to Pearl Harbor in 94, 95.
You bet.
So it was about 18 months of schooling for all this
Yeah,
stuff, like all
for
the stuff put together.
well, full disclosure, I wasn't the most academically sound person going through this training. When I showed up, they looked at my academic records and I didn't have enough of the prerequisite calculus and physics, and they sent me to preschool. So I've graduated as a 22-year-old out of college. I'm like, there's some paper that, like, university, like whatever, in the background. I was like, oh, this is the honors cum laude guy. You're going to preschool. I thought preschool is for 4-year-olds. Well, preschool is for 22-year-olds who don't have a bachelor of science and aren't so good with all their trigonometry.
With
So
trigonometry.
well, they start off with trigonometry, and then the
Yeah.
next day is pre-calculus, then it's
Oof.
calculus, then it's differential equations. I used to dream in equations.
Oof.
Yeah, I used to dream like really long, like X sine factor, sigma, whatever, integral, like stuff that I'm not good now. But if you're dreaming in equations, obviously it's got a hold of
Well,
you, right? So
those are
it
not
took longer.
those are not typically called dreams. They are called nightmares.
Yeah, I know. I had nightmares of nuclear power. Anyhow, long story short, I took longer than how they want most candidates. But they didn't want you to fail. You're going to lose some people in basic training, or lose some people in truck driving school or culinary school, whatever we do. They don't want to lose you if they've spent all that money in the investment. I just took
Yeah.
longer to get out and finally
Yeah.
get to work. So yeah, I show up in 95, and then you get to work, and the submarine goes and deploys. And here's where I guess I'll lead with that apology. I got cool stories. Well, not cool. I got stories about cleaning. I got stories of almost dying. And the problem is, like, I got some awesome stories of, like, here's the periscope, because here I was off the coast of, oh, I'll never tell you. And it's so dissatisfying, probably for your viewers, not to mention my spouse, who's like, what do you mean you're keeping secrets from me? Honey, I'm keeping secrets from everybody. You want to go ask the National Security Agency, you want to go ask the CIA, have at it. It's the most frustrating thing interviewing submariners is there's some reason why they're decorated, and we're not going to talk about it. I walk into the VFW, and the pilot started, here I was, the MiG was here. They got some great stories, or I got this one from the Taliban, and I got this one from Al Qaeda, and, like, good on you, man. How did you do that? How do you earn that? And I said, I just did stuff. So that's like my minute and a half disclaimer of,
Yeah.
I'll have to slow this really down and water it down, or I'll just say, like, we do not discuss submarine operations. Boring, but it comes with the job.
Dan and I are here in the shadow of Fort Bragg, and believe me, there's a lot of people around here who I know, many of them who can't talk about their careers either. So,
and then there's the guys that will make sure that you know that they can't talk about their careers.
Oh yeah, I'll try not to be that guy for your viewers and for the rest of it.
Fair.
You're at Pearl Harbor now. Had you ever been that far, like, outside of the continental United States before? Had you traveled much growing up?
My parents tried to get me around when they could. One, because some places are fun. I'd been to Hawaii a couple times before. Two, if you get out of your bubble, especially if you get out of America, it doesn't take long, especially in the third world, to have an appreciation for running water or power that usually works, or a democratically elected republic, which is typically accountable to the voters. And one of the reasons why I wanted to serve is a sense of patriotism, because it was instilled upon me from my veteran father. But it's not the same going to a tropical paradise like Hawaii as a tourist or as a resident as you show up to work. I couldn't wait to get out of the submarine, because it has a certain distinctive smell to it. It has a lot of fluorescent lighting, but no natural sunlight. If I could get a weekend off, or I could get some aloha time, there is surfing, there is diving, there is hiking, there is kayaking. There's all these beautiful things that the islands give to you. It doesn't have the best internet. That matters to you. If you really want to ski, there's some skiing. You gotta go to Idaho or Washington or California for that.
It's water skiing.
There's plenty of water skiing. Absolutely. You got me there.
Okay, so how long were you at Pearl Harbor before you took the dive?
Oh, it's about a couple weeks when you show up and you need to get a place to live, and it's nice to get a driver's license. And there's some more medical exams. There's some more security clearance work. You start off with the basics, but then the leadership knows what that boat is about to do. And so they need to train you on specifically what that boat is about to do. So before you become a useful asset, remember, keep on saying be useful to the
Hmm.
submarine interior unit. There's some additional training they need, but it's not long before we're out, we're underwater, and then we're going off and doing our stuff. And then we come back. In my case, yeah, I can say this 46 days later, my first mission, my first patrol was complete. We went out. It's called an extended deployment into the Western Pacific area of operations. And we come back with some medals on our chest, and you show up, and these people from the Office of Naval Intelligence, sometimes they've got handcuffs, they come off and they're taking hard drives before you can go off and drink your beer or say hi to, hey honey, how's it been? Those people come on, take take your work and take your work off to some place that I didn't figure out until later when I was working for the Office of Naval Intelligence. Welcome to the
Okay,
submarine
so
force. I told you it was going to be boring.
no. Oh, I don't think it's boring. I mean, we've been hunting for a submariner for quite some time for this reason, to find this
I
stuff
will
out.
I will disappoint as best as I can.
So is 46 days typical, or was that just that specific one?
I'm glad you asked, because anybody who is your viewers who are forwarding this to submariners are screaming, "What? That guy only had to do 46 days on his first deployment?" And you know what? Yeah. Was it up to me? No. Was I the guy or the girl in charge? No. That's what it. We went out later, longer, but 46 is short. We have ballistic missile submarines, which are going to go out for much, much longer. And they are going to go out on strategic deterrent patrols with nuclear warheads in the ocean, and they will be down for a much longer time. When they come back, actually, the boat will come back and they will swap out with a different crew. We will call them a blue crew and a gold crew. We'll have two different crews for one vessel. And the purpose is to keep those nuclear warheads deployed at sea longer. It's not the only military unit that utilizes a blue and a gold
Right.
crew, but it's designed to take machinery and weapons that are already up and working and give people a break so you don't cycle people significantly much harder than you thought was possible in
Yeah,
human endurance. Pull one crew off, give them some vacation, give them some R&R, give them some training, put the other crew on, and
makes
have those
sense.
warheads go back to work. It's
How does
efficient.
how do they switch out those crews?
Those crews will get swapped out when the boat comes back to port. We keep
Oh, okay,
those.
okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I
We
I
keep
would
those
think that you would want to keep that mission critical asset at sea, and then I don't know, link up with a cruiser or some other vessel and
more than
come
one way to do that.
topside and switch people out. Maybe I don't know,
Right.
but
In fact, there will be some Navy vessels which perform that type of crew rotation. The vessel will stay deployed abroad and they will fly out other people. In the case of the submarine, there's some maintenance to do. There's some classified refitting that needs to happen. There's some ordnance payload that needs to do this. And we don't like to, even if you're out on really calm seas, you're still going to feel this on a submarine. Remember, most ships at the bottom, they're kind of built like this. This is the bottom of the ship with the superstructure. A submarine is built rounded like this. She's not meant to handle a lot of waves up on the surface. New people uh, lose their appetite very quickly when we're on a submarine on the surface transiting. You really don't want to be in lousy weather. You can't wait to get under and underwater. I know that sounds weird, but when you're just doing that much rocking and rolling, some people are going to try Dramamine. Most of it's going to say, can I get down and deep? And usually, once you are down, the weather gets better. I did have one exception. I was on a submarine and went underneath Hurricane Andrew, and that was the that was the first time ever we're down so far deep, and we're still rocking and rolling like this. I'm trying to keep my eyes within the here. Let's do this. Now oh my goodness, get back in the frame. Okay,
Oof,
we couldn't
oof.
get around it. That's a big hurricane. That was one of those big ones.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
if you can't I should be grateful. If you can't get around it, at least we could go under it. So the category of sailors says I've gone under a hurricane. You don't get a medal for that, but the lunch didn't sit well either that deep.
My experience as a old paratrooper is if one person tosses their cookies, it's usually a chain reaction. After that, I assume the same is on the sub. But
It's a little different because you do get your sea legs, right? The funny part is funny. I shouldn't use that. Well, if we bring on visitors, we sometimes we'll bring on aviators. They can learn. We'll bring on aviators that are trained in hunting submarines. There's nothing like bringing in Orion or that's an old submarine hunter. We now use some upgraded planes and teaching them what it's like to get away from them. And it's funny how the aviators are great with their motion sickness up at 30,000 feet. They're not so great at 300 feet below. So it's almost comical. I shouldn't say that. That's not fair. Apologies to my friends who are aviators. Then again, when I was flying in the back of the Growler, the pilot, his call sign was Furball. He said, "I wonder how many barrel rolls it'll take to make Orvik puke." And the answer is 3 if you put me in a prowler. So you knew exactly what you were doing. Maybe this is just payback.
it's a proof
My
of
later,
concept.
yeah,
Yes.
my later hops in the fighter jets. I had some time doing that post Navy. You know, you you learn to get your air legs. You can learn to get your 2 legs, and the food stays down.
How, to the extent you're able to answer this, how often did y'all have to do, or maybe a better way of saying it, how often were y'all a taxi service to get personnel from point A to point B rather than, on weapons patrols?
Got it. Let's talk a little bit about submarine operation. Then we'll be specific to mine. I think the submarines that perform, I'm going to air quote this taxi service, would take umbrage. In reality, special delivery vehicles for SEALs and some of the other qualified infiltrators that we have all over the services don't necessarily feel it's like a taxi. There's something very grateful if you're going to be Navy SEAL or Special Forces in that every time I have to kick or swim or paddle through my rebreathers through some rough current, that's a lot more work. That's a lot more energy I have to expend when I really need to get right on point, on mission, do my job, snipe my target, collect my intel, extract the high value person or hostage, and get back to work. So those taxi services perform a very, very useful function, making sure that these SEALs are trained, ready to go, as close to on station as you can get, and with the absolute knowledge that there is a warm meal, there is a warm shower, there is a warm bed waiting for you when you get back. The last thing you want to think is, man, I'm gonna have to swim this for. I mean, they're triathletes. They're really good at what they
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they want to keep their adrenaline. They want to keep their. It's cold down there, right? They want to keep all of that energy for what they do. So we do have some dedicated taxi service submarines. I'm not one of them in the USS San Francisco. However, we'll all get trained in how to do some of that work, which is to say, the submarine will be out on the surface. The helicopter will come up top. We'll drop down a net or drop down a rope, and we will practice. In this case, we're bringing on some Marines. Let's have the Marines fast rope down to the submarine and get it on, because that's a useful thing that you need to do, because those taxi boats, the SSGNs and USS Jimmy Carter would be an example of
Yep.
that. They're built to handle a lot more room. That's all I really need to talk about Jimmy.
Yeah.
They'll have their job, but everybody who is a submariner will get some training in how to deliver either a payload or people or both. What if the people doesn't need to leave the boat and extract something? What if the people are really trained in a language that we'd want to hear or see? What if the people are really trained in an electronic signature or a hydroacoustic signature on sonar that we want to know a little bit more about? Wouldn't it be nice if we get those really smart people who we've been training for their taxage and put them on station and let them listen, let them see? There's some utility there. So that's how some of the taxi service would work, and it's really useful. We there's a lot of ocean out there. A lot of it is international waters. There's a lot of ways that we can just be close and have the enemy not know. We're recording this in June of 2025, and for your viewers, whenever they're watching this, just a couple days ago, there was an unnamed submarine which is launching Tomahawk cruise missiles into Iran. And we're using cruise missiles, which are rockets which launch and then deploy an air scoop and breathe air like a jet engine, and then blow up with carefully guided munitions, because we really don't necessarily want to risk a pilot and their airframe on a dangerous mission. And you can do this with submarines. And usually the enemy is like, where are those warheads? And the answer is, we don't know. That's a lot of ocean. When you can deliver that much opacity to the enemy, it gives them pause. Whether it's the cruise missiles that we have out there all the time, or whether it's the nuclear warheads that are deployed 24/7, 365 for the last, it's been over 50 years that we've been doing this. I mean, let's be candid. We know where our missiles in the ground are, and those people are very good at what those do. We got those missileers, perfect, and we know where the enemies are. And the enemy satellites aren't as good as ours, but they're just sitting right over there. And we know where those bombers are, at least when they're on the ground. Again, we're recording this in June 2025. Last month, the Ukrainians execute an incredible act of daring do and blow up a lot of Russian bombers. It helps.
What about
to know
a third of their fleet?
It's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And that's not only doing the favor for Ukraine. Think about like today, right now, for you viewers, a NATO summit is happening, and NATO is always concerned about how many Russian bombers are out there. And the answer is, thanks to the Ukrainians, there's a significant fewer number of bombers that could threaten any of our NATO allies, right? Yeah. So where are those submarine launched warheads? We don't know. They're somewhere out in the ocean. And so if your opponent doesn't know where your second strike ability is, ideally this gives some pause. This requires some rational thinking. Right? Yeah. There's some people who say, I'm willing to die for my cause. Well, you know, we all are. We took that oath, support, uphold, and defend. We're willing to die for the Constitution. But if you have a rational opponent on the other side who wants to stay alive for them or their family or their regime, it gives them pause, not knowing where those American warheads are at any time. And if they hear a big thud, those warheads are probably coming inbound. That's the mentality of a Cold Warrior.
It's awesome.
So how long were you stationed at Pearl Harbor?
You go for... Most people in my line of work, I was stationed there for 3 years, and then it was time to go. Some people will go longer. The longest submarine enlistments are around 5 years. Some people could have a longer term on that contract. For the commissioned officers, we'll typically have you do 3 years on the submarine, and then we will roll you ashore for some training or development work. And if you stay within the submarine pipeline, you will advance to greater positions of seniority, no matter what your rank or your rate is, and spend more of your time back to the submarines. So after 3 years, it was time to leave Pearl Harbor.
So of that 3 years, about how much time would you say you spent at sea?
Half of it.
Half?
Yeah, I believe it.
Half of it. Yeah. No, if you're going to deploy, I said that 46 days, and another one gone several months longer. Those are long, extended deployments with a full ordnance room. That's not counting the workup times where you're going to go out. Ideally, it's Monday through Friday, but let's be candid. Once we go underwater on deployment, there is no Saturday. There's
every
no
day is a Monday.
Every day is a Monday. And
Dan and I know all about the Groundhog Day that is deployment.
It is deployment. Well, actually, it depends on how you cross the international date line. We'll actually respect that. You can have 2 Mondays, or they could take the Monday away from you. They probably won't give you 2 movie days. There probably won't be 2 steak and lobster days. Sunday is like, you actually track the day of the week, usually by what the food is on the menu, right? Every Friday has got to be pizza night. Cool. Food really matters when you're all wearing the same stuff. I think I gotta, right? We're wearing this stuff underwater, right? This is the, your submarine uniform. They're pretty similar. You're wearing the same clothes. The air smells
like a
the
jumpsuit.
same.
Similar?
It's very similar to a jumpsuit. Yes, it's very similar to a jumpsuit is what we would wear. It's comfortable, right? You want to be comfortable if you're going to be that much underwater. But getting back to the food, that's a morale booster. It's like, are you gone for 8 weeks or are you gone for 8 pizza rotations? There's different ways that you can count it.
Yeah.
You said about the international date line. Just Dan, real quick. Do you remember we had a Coastie on back in the fall, and he made a comment about how he had a friend who he said the
Yeah, the
Coast
Coast
Guard
Guard stole his
can do
birthday.
anything, but they can't take my birthday away from me. And then they took his birthday away from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're going that way, it's, the accounting is going
Oops.
to go up. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. Well, before we move on from Pearl Harbor, um, I read or I heard this somewhere, years ago. But if a member of the crew dies at sea, they put him in the freezer. Is that correct?
Yes. And
And
there's
if
usually there's enough body bags to handle more than one fatality. That's not
it,
a happy question, but I see where you're going. Keep going.
yeah, and then if there is, I mean, if the mission is still ongoing or whatever, then they will actually bury them at sea by jettisoning them out of the torpedo tubes.
Burial at sea has been going on for millennia. It's a
Oh,
time-honored practice, and it's actually a great discussion because I would encourage every veteran and every Navy veteran, if they are, encapsulated, whatever that word is, or especially if they're in urn, if they're in ashes, to consider burial at sea. Because if you've done a burial at sea, it's a special thing. People are all dressed up in their really pretty white uniforms, or they're pretty navy blue. Navy blue equals black, just to let you know. It's like this color, but we call it navy blue because, well, we've got our things. Anyhow, and the chaplain will say some words, and the captain will say some words, and everybody will lay to above and below decks while service. It's a very weird time to go from doing watch or taking logs or running drills or practicing weapons. Then everything just kind of stops, and we're going to honor the dead. And you can, yes, shoot them out a torpedo tube, provided that you're not going to scratch the tube too much. So don't expect to do that as a corpse. Expect to do that as ashes. That's on my list, but that's like at the very, very end of my list. Hopefully I get to come back for round 2 or 3 of Tracer Burnout. Yeah, sure. All right, you're getting close to getting shot out the tube. Yeah, I'd like that. You can take the deceased and you can bury them at sea with full honors and tip them overboard. And there's much other, or you can go to one of the veteran cemeteries all over the nation. There's a bunch of ways to do it. The funniest, can I say this? I can say some of this joke. You can be buried in the air too. There are many of some of those submarine hunters that have torpedo tubes that you can actually shoot downwards, which works out fine if you want to be buried downwards. Except sometimes those torpedo systems malfunction. So I heard a story. I wasn't there, where they're in the sky and that torpedo ejection failed, and all of a sudden the ashes, instead of shooting out, are shooting into the cabin. So now they're getting buried inside the cabin. Right. Not a dignified way to do this. And I'm not going to identify the airman. I'm not going to identify the airplane. I'm not going to identify the deceased. All of this information would be inappropriate. It's happened at least once, and I heard the story, and I wasn't there. So there's a bunch of ways to go. Let's be candid. They're all better than dying on the battlefield. And we all know people who, didn't make it out. This kind of gets somber here. I've delivered more folded flags to more mothers and widows than I want to, right? One is too many. But if you're going to do it, go out a submarine. If it's on your bucket list, well, it's actually be off the bucket list, right? If that's how you're going to kick the bucket that out of submarine.
So where to after Pearl Harbor?
Yep.
After Pearl Harbor, when people leave, they will go to some other tour. In fact, my assignment was as a shift engineer at a nuclear power training unit, which is where that aforementioned prototype. When I was a student, I did the prototype in Charleston, South Carolina. When I was instructor, I went to Ballston Spa, New York. And I think one of you is very familiar with upstate New York, also very close to Saratoga Springs. Right. So there's the Schenectady nuclear labs there and the Knowles Atomic Power Laboratory. And we got a site where we have some reactors and they train people how to work. So my job, again, is training new sailors how to operate in a nuclear reactor that is not leaving upstate New York. It's not going to run aground. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's not going to screw up that 3-point turn, because sometimes Navy ships hit things. And when they do, I mean, we'll eventually talk about this, what happened to the ship after I left. So I was an instructor, and you go teach nuclear engineering.
I guess yeah, in the Army we'd refer to that as our professional military education, your PME.
A
So
little different, actually. So
yeah,
I am one of those PME and those joint PME
yeah,
educators. Yeah, you can do that with correspondence courses. I actually wound up not having PME or JPME qualifying
right,
tours. So I wound up getting my education. I mean, in the military, we never stop learning. It's probably one of the cooler things about our job. But if you really want to do some extra credit, I did my PME through correspondence courses and through additional online classes. The good news is we're all specialists in what we do, whether it's jumping out of an airplane or being a sniper or being a nuclear engineer on a submarine. It behooves you to understand this little broader thing known as the Department of Defense. And I like to think that PME is definitely part of it. So after I teach in the reactor, that's a relatively strenuous job. The what we call a zero defect mentality. You
yeah,
can't afford to have big mistakes on the reactor, especially on the ship. I would actually give my students just enough rope to let them think that they're hanging themselves, knowing I'm not going to literally hang sailors, but I think you get the idea, right? You want to have that same. Remember, I showed that moment when the water's coming to the people tank.
Yeah.
We want that student thinking, "Oh no, I really screwed up this nuclear equation or this nuclear thing." The student may not have enough experience to understand that we have some safety mechanisms to ensure that they're not going to melt down a reactor. We'll stay several steps ahead of that. But I found that the most engaging moment of training is when the student really feels at the precipice that there's a lot riding on what they're about to do with this nuclear reactor.
yeah.
By the time they graduate, they are more confident, and when we send them off to submarines and aircraft carriers. Remember, all of our United States aircraft carriers are nuclear powered. In fact, all of them have not just one, but two nuclear reactors for a little bit extra power and a little bit extra redundancy.
That's actually a fantastic segue to another question that I had in regards to subs.
Mm-hmm.
From the time you entered service to the time you left, how many, to the extent you can answer this, but how many
Mm-hmm.
subs did we have in the U.S. fleet that were nuclear versus, I don't know, the old diesel engines? We'll just say non-nuclear. Like what
Sure, absolutely. And we're certainly dating myself, but I
yeah,
tee myself up high for that. Almost all of our submarines are nuclear powered. We have some research vessels and some deep submergence vehicles, which are submarines, which are powered by batteries. And we used to have a submarine called the Dolphin, and she was built extra strong, but she didn't need to have a nuclear reactor. She used her diesel engines,
hmm,
and she could be used for deep diving missions. We have a lot of research activities that we do in the Navy. These days, if you're going to build a submarine with actually a lot of people in it for deployment, in America, they will be nuclear powered.
yeah,
The next common event is to have them be diesel powered. And by the way, American submarines also have a diesel engine. It is used as a backup. If the reactor doesn't work, you have a diesel engine that can suck in air, spit out hydrocarbon gases, turn a generator, and give you some electricity and give some propulsion. If that doesn't work, you have a battery. And by a battery, it's not just one battery. Envision like a car battery in your car, about Orvik sized, and we have a lot of them stacked up in series at the bottom of the submarine. So we have a backup to the backup because these are important to have a lot of redundancy in what we do. Some of the
Yeah.
other world submarines have nuclear powered boats. China would be an example, the United Kingdom, Russia, France. It's a small group, and there's some very, very smart Swedes and some very smart Germans that are using alternatives to nuclear power, which use some very cool chemicals and some very cool internal combustion where you can contain the combustion. I'm not smart enough to explain it. But of course, the benefit actually, why do we do this? Remember, most of the things that we used to fight, you got to come up for air. Like people, like those cruise missiles that need engines, rockets don't work well underwater, planes don't work well underwater. You need to come up to breathe for most of your internal combustion engines, etc. With a nuclear reactor, you don't need to do that. You can stay underwater longer. And so if you can stay underwater longer, you have two things. You have greater mobility and you have greater stealthiness because you have more places to hide. The challenge is submariners detect each other typically with sound, with sonar. Sound goes a lot faster and a lot farther underwater. Remember when you're like, holding your nose under the swimming pool and you can hear a lot of noise, even from far away at the other side of the pool, but you can't tell where that sound is coming from because humans' ears aren't fast enough to hear that divergence in wavelength reception underwater. We're
Yeah.
fast enough here in the air. Like in my screen, Roger is over here. So if Roger were next to me, I'd be able to hear and say, my writer's hearing it just a little faster. Roger's over here and Dan's over here. Your viewers may have me in some other spot, but I kind of put myself in the middle mentally, just so just so I could get it from both barrels. I probably asked for that. So if you can stay underwater, that's beautiful, but you're making noise. A nuclear reactor has got usually a lot of machinery. So we're trying to make that machinery quieter. The entire submarine is actually coated with anechoic tiling. It's like some rubberized material that makes the outside quieter. And the inside is mounted on some rubberized mounts and elevations such that it is difficult to make a lot of noise promulgate out from the submarine. It is loud inside the boat. You are wearing these muffs with these earplugs inside. There's some loud places on the boat, but outside she's designed to be quiet. And if you can be quieter than the other person, you will usually detect them faster. And in submarine service, noise is death. So the silent service persists by being quiet. Remember, all you need to do is put a little hole in the submarine to have a lot of water rush in quickly. So if you can find where a submarine is, she becomes very vulnerable. Hiding and staying undetected is our line of work.
So when you were up there in New York at the nuclear facility, were you training future submariners?
Yes. So they come.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So they were actually being trained to go out onto a nuclear submarine.
Absolutely. And they're not just submariners. They're going to be in the reactor department of our CVNs, our nuclear powered aircraft carriers, like the Nimitz, like the Ford, like the Vincent or the Lincoln. We have some aircraft carriers we always have aircraft carriers on deployment somewhere. So those sailors will be trained. And who better than an experienced sailor coming off of that submarine or coming off of that aircraft carrier to train the next generation?
Perfect. All right, let's take a quick break real quick and we'll continue.
All right. So you are at the nuclear training facility training future submariners on nuclear reactor tech. Before we move on from your time there at that facility, how many months in a row, or maybe months total, did the inanimate carbon rod win Employee of the Month, or perhaps Trainee of the Month?
Oh, come on, you're a Gen Xer. You have to get this reference.
Uh-oh.
He's making that take.
He's not even going to edit it out. I'm stuck with this, so I'm just going to own it because you got me there. Can you dumb that down or declassify that for me?
Dan, shall I?
They're just going to rewind it, and now my kids are watching this and thinking, "Oh, that's
well, I mean, they're too young to get it." It's so Homer Simpson, who's a nuclear safety inspector.
Oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah,
okay, now I get it.
He has it gamed out and says, hey, according to the union bylaws, every single employee at the plant at some point has to win Employee of the Month, and I'm the only person to this point who is not.
Okay.
So therefore, this month, I have to be the Employee of the Month. And Mr. Burns gets up on the huge, of course, he talks down to everybody. Sure. So he's up on the huge raised platform and he shouts down,
this guy, right?
I can't believe we've overlooked this employee for so long. We're so foolish, and so this month's Employee of the Month is this inanimate carbon rod. And of course,
okay. So I thought way too much into this, but I'm glad you brought it up. Let's discuss Homer Simpson for a moment. This has a special inanimate caustic nature for we, the nuclear operators, because to our record, I have operated 3 different nuclear reactors with 0 inadvertent radioactivity released to the environment. And that's a lot of zero defect mentality to say, hey, there are Chernobyls, there are Fukushimas, there are 3 Mile Islands. For your viewers right now, the United States recently and the nation of Israel recently attacked nuclear reactors and nuclear preparation centrifuge sites in some other country. There is risk of some of that uranium going up and out. Yep. Not on our watch, not on our Navy's watch. We haven't had those accidents happen. if there was some wood, I'd knock on it, but I'm not a superstitious person. This comes a lot of training and a zero defect mentality. But the problem is when we talk about the carbon rod, if you ask Americans who's the most famous basketball player, they'd have one. Who's the most famous astronaut? Some people know. What's your famous band? Who's your famous nuclear engineer? They're going to say Homer Simpson. And like, I have two problems with that. Number one, Homer Simpson is not even a real person. I'm a fan, right? But two, why are we praising the inanimate, humorous character who mistakenly and humorously screws up on nuclear power all the time? I mean, there's that Blinky, there's that three-eyed fish. Matt Groening is just like, oh, Rusty, keep on giving me royalties. Have at it, right? Because now people are going to like, they'll cue me and cue the Blinky. But wouldn't it be nice if we actually knew, like France, the nation of France uses like 80 to 90% of their grid on nuclear power. But they do. Yeah. Nucleoid power, right? They say nuclear power is good. I don't know how to say that in French. Maybe your French viewers can say, how do you say nuclear power is good? Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. Got it. Well, like that. So France trains their people. Hey, here's reactors. That keeps your lights on. We do that in America. But when Homer Simpson is the most famous representative for nuclear power, it's not necessarily leaning well towards our ability to eventually graduate from some of all these greenhouse gas stuff. Now, carbon rod, the rods in the reactor, some of them can make out of carbon. The reason why we do that, to get kind of the techies, is let's just back up a little bit. How does nuclear power work, right? You got uranium. Those are hot rocks with water on them. Water steamy, right? Running past turbine generators, roundy, connected to wires that go sparky. And that is how you, yes, exactly. Go on. So that's suck, squeeze, bang, and blow for internal combustion engine or for the aviators. That's how you dumb down nuclear power. But if you want those uranium hot rocks to have less hot rock interaction with each other, put a carbon rod or other types of neutron absorbers in to slow down the reaction. That's the difference between a nuclear reactor and a nuclear weapon. A nuclear weapon has radioactive material that you're not going to slow down. It's going to get faster and faster in terms of microseconds, and all of a sudden you have a very large uncontrollable boom. We nuclear engineers try to have a not boom. We try to have a really slow, no boom, hot rocks, steamy, roundy turbine, sparky, and that's how your lights stay on, right? We don't want to make the news. You just want to turn on the light switch and say, hey, yep, nuclear power's working. And in the ship, and watch the sentence. In the ship, we'll take that steam or that electricity, we'll power generators, and that's how the screw or the propeller or the propulsion goes roundy. Here's where we're really bake your noodle. How do you think we get all that? Well, I'm just going to tell you. What if we take some people? We all need water. We already talked about all the air that we need for the submarine. All that water. How do we get that stuff out? Right? You have to ask that question. Might as well just give you, or we could have, because I don't think Homer Simpson would explain it well. Why don't you hear it from a real nuclear engineer? Nuclear engineering 101: how to get air and water. Take the ocean, that's seawater. You can't drink that salt, but what you can do is you can bring on the seawater. You can use those hot rocks and that hot steam from the water, and you can make that water very hot. If you do, you're going to have brine that stays down at the bottom. You're going to evaporate off steam. If you condense it, kind of like how your radiator works, your air conditioning, and then let that drip, you can collect that water. Or you could use reverse osmosis. Remember those Sparkies go online? That runs out a lot of power. You got megawatts of power. And if you force seawater and sodium and chloride through a semi-permeable membrane, and by membrane, it's like really small. You can keep the fresh water on one side and push the sodium and the chloride, the salt on the other side. And if you just drink the freshwater side, you can make water that way. Or you could take, so now you got fresh water, right? Now you've got H2O. But we don't breathe H2O. We breathe O2 because we are humans, right? So you could take that H2O, run tens of thousands of volts through it, zappy, and all of a sudden your hydrogen is going to separate and go over here, and your oxygen is going to separate and go over here. And now if you are very, very careful, because hydrogen is a boom thing, if you slowly get rid of your hydrogen and let that oxygen bleed in, oxygen and oxygen, they're called diatomic, they like to hang out together. So does carbon, so does freon, so does nitrogen. He's like, and Homer goes, oh, right? There's right, might have lost your viewers, but a little bit of science. That's how you can take seawater and drink it, or that's how you can take fresh water and turn it into oxygen. And that's how you can stay underwater a long time, making your own air, making your own water. We don't really come up to fish. It's not very convenient to fish. We got to bring on enough food. We're limited by how long we can hang out up here and how much food we can carry. That's how long a nuclear submarine can stay on station, carrying out missions of vital importance to national security.
Eating algae paste.
Yes. Try it. Well,
how many years did you do the training at the nuclear training facility?
I trained for one. I was a very short timer. To be honest, it wasn't my favorite job. Probably doing as a Californian coming from Hawaii, my challenge going to New York, sorry for the exception, the host in New York, shoveling snow was not on my bingo card when I wound up joining the Navy. And now I got to shovel snow to get to work. And then I got to get home. And now I got to shovel the driveway after working the shift before I can just home and go to sleep for like 10 hours and then go back and go to work again. And it's like, I could do this, or I could leave the service. And that's actually what I did. I chose to leave active duty. I became a reservist. I still wanted to help out, but I wanted to get married. I wanted to start a family. I wanted to take that GI Bill. I mean, let's 3 pays for the GI Bill. I wanted to do a couple other things.
So it was really the snow that forced you out of the Navy.
It broke him.
Well, for your viewers, like let's not throw everybody under the bus. It's like, how many awesome people do you have show up doing ship work to nuclear engineering and say, gee, that was fun? It's like, it's the opposite of fun. I don't want you to have fun on a nuclear reactor, right?
Fair.
I want you to have, let's do 8 hours of not fun. Okay. Yeah. I'm kind of like a fun guy. Maybe I could do something else. And like many other people who put on the uniform, you put it on for one reason, you take it off for another. I didn't want to leave it all behind. I joined the Navy Reserve, and I'm a big fan of the Reserve or the National Guard. That's good. I went back to Silicon Valley. Took that GI Bill, went into grad school. Wife and I spent more time together. It's a good time with the spouse. Shift work can be a little challenging.
When you got out, or when you decided to get out, had you already met your wife at that point?
I knew my wife from high school, and she's going to watch this, and she's going to say, "Don't talk about this stuff." So I'm not going to, because her version of high school and my version is a lot different. But I got married after I left the submarine and went to what we call shore duty or instructor duty, or that PME tour. As we all know, the military and the deployment schedule can be very difficult on relationships. Yeah. And I don't blame my significant other for wanting a little bit more stability. So he said, why don't we take this opportunity and really take the stability and grow our marriage and go back to school and spend more time with family. And that's exactly what happened. I didn't leave all of my military behind. I joined the Navy Reserve. Yeah. And that's that or the National Guard, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. And I was really enjoying it. What I really liked best was one of my reserve tours was with the Office of Naval Intelligence. And for your viewers who probably didn't listen to the entire thing, because I'm kind of a boring guy, I used to talk about deploying with Navy intelligence stuff that I can't talk about. But when I actually did it for the reserve side, then I get to look at other people's work as well. Like, I'm off in the middle of nowhere, and a lot of us, there I was with my tank, or there was my plane in the middle of nowhere with just one piece of the puzzle. There are people, and I got to do this once as a reservist, where I got to see a lot of the pieces of the puzzle and put them together and say, this piece plus this piece plus this piece equals why we think the enemy is doing X or not X. And it was nice to finally put those pieces together. And that worked fine, having a job, doing grad school, doing reserve stuff, until 9/11. And 9/11 is it's a change for almost all of us. It's a huge change for me. Why am I here in Silicon Valley working a 9 to 5 when I got buddies that are fighting or gonna go fight? And my civilian job wasn't super, they were supportive and understanding, but they kind of figure like, hey, my performance wasn't as good as it could be, because I kind of feeling that stock options are nice and profit and loss is nice, but hey, we're dropping bombs over here. So I didn't stay a reservist long after 9/11. I went down, tried to volunteer for one job, and I walked into the wrong job. I was looking for a permanent job in the second deck in San Diego. The people who spent time in San Diego, Navy Marine Corps will know that the office I'm talking about that doesn't exist anymore. If you walk up on the second floor, we call them decks, that's where you can go volunteer for other full-time jobs. But I just walked on the ground floor and I said, hey, I kind of talked in Navy speak, where the job's at. And this guy says, hey, what do you know about sales? I said, sales? And then I thought profanity. I just walked into the recruiting office. So I just gave what I knew about sales to this guy who's signing me up. And then 2 weeks later, I've done all my paperwork and I'm recalled as a recruiter. And my job is going to be hiring, recruiting. And I spent 7 years. That is a long time. Recruiting, that's a long time to keep on translating what we need post 9/11 to civilian speak. Specifically, if I'm going to hire reservists, I need engineers, I need doctors, I need anesthesiologists. And anesthesiologists don't necessarily speak military speak, but they were using me for that. So I'm spending 7 years, and that's my major contribution, with the exception of one special mission that this is a good one to talk about. I didn't even know. You ever know, like, you're doing that job for deployment, you have no idea, why am I doing this? I don't get this at all, but my job is not to ask why, right? I have one job that they say, we need you to very quietly make sure this big tanker fills up on a bunch of kerosene and just does its job. And so, why do you need me for that? I said, don't ask why. So, all right, I did not have a need to know, but I'm helping this tanker in Bay Area. And there's a lot of, for people familiar with the Bay Area, California, there are places called Richmond or Martinez where they do a lot of refining. And at the time, we'd never do this now, but at the time, there's this Chinese tanker that I'm helping fill up with a bunch of kerosene. And I'm thinking, this is some big, that kerosene is what powers jet engines, right? Why do I need to have Chinese tanker load up on kerosene? My boss says, you don't need to know that. You're right. I don't need to know that. Well, can't we have some force protection? Force protection is like a big deal at this time. I only had 2 missions of force protection. One I can talk about, and 2 I can only give you pieces. But for this one, I'm thinking, can't we get some Marines? Can't we get no uniform? I got a California Highway Patrolman. That's all they give me. Said, officer, your job is just to not let any protesters come down the pier. Okay. That's the best overtime pay that officer ever got. So we just load up this big Chinese tanker and off she goes. She goes underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, international waters. There we go. I find out later that a bunch of B-52s load up in Diego Garcia. That's apparently where the gas went. And they carpet bomb Kandahar. Yeah. And they're carpet bombing Kandahar. And I think you guys will have much more understanding than this. But if you're going to get carpet bombed, there's at 40,000 feet, there's these buffs. You can't see them. You can't hear them. Just all of a sudden, things start raining down terror upon you. That must be a awesomely terrifying experience. And my job, one of my post 9/11 jobs, was to very quietly, very inexpensively move tens of thousands of tons of kerosene from point A to the refineries to Diego Garcia without anybody knowing about it. Mission accomplished. Right. And I didn't put those pieces together until later. Right. Do I deserve credit? No, the credit goes to the Marines on the ground in Kandahar or the pilots flying. I just, I know this is a child show, so I can't finish it, but you can't kick A without gas. A is a profanity, but you can't kick A without gas. It doesn't rhyme because I'm not swearing. But, for the nuclear engineer who can kick A without gas, this is an interesting thing for me to learn about hydrocarbons and petrochemicals. Other than recruiting, the other important mission that I did in 9/11 was I spent some time with the Coast Guard, and I was their resident nuke. And when you call someone a nuke, that's like the Homer Simpson who actually knows something. And the watch officers in the Coast Guard call me and say, we need you to do some nuclear stuff. I say, okay, I can do some nuclear stuff. And you're in this watch center. And remember, after 9/11, we instigated the Air Marshal Program. And the Air Marshals are government employees with a weapon. You don't know who they are, but they know how to take action such that it's much more difficult to hijack a plane. Now you have some passenger who is armed, who knows how to shoot terrorists. Well, we also had the Sea Marshal Program. And the Sea Marshal Program is the exact same idea. We will put some coasties out on the ship. We'll put one on the bridge. The bridge is like where they do the steering. And we'll put one in engineering. The engineering is where all the turbines go roundy, right? And the whole point is so you don't take a ship and crash a ship into buildings or bridges. We've seen that recently, what happens when a tanker runs sideways in the Suez Canal. one tanker can stop international trade. We've
Baltimore
seen that.
too.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
But Baltimore is where I was going next. So, or you can have the Mexican sailing ship that runs out of power and hits the
Oh,
Brooklyn
in New
Bridge.
York. Yeah.
Right. And like,
Yeah.
car crashes happen all the time. When an airplane crashes, you got to talk about it anywhere in the world if it's big. When a ship crashes, you got to talk about it. When a submarine crashes, the entire world will talk about it, like that Argentinian submarine or that tourist submarine down at the Titanic. Everybody, there's something about a submarine going missing. All that mystery makes people interesting. Back to the nuke story. I know I'm jumping all around the spot. The Coast Guards had some sea marshals who were doing some inspecting. They're looking for nuclear weapons. And they say, we detected some nuclear activity on this cargo ship. Hundreds, if not thousands, of cargo ships go in and out of our harbors every single day and every single night. Baltimore, Long Beach, Charleston.
Houston.
Yeah, right. That's where most of our gas and oil comes from, right? Like America drinks, right? That's where oil comes in, right? America drinks a swimming pool of oil every second, right? Most of it out of Houston. Anyhow, so they're coming into Long Beach and they say, we need you to help figure out if these people are smuggling in an atomic or a nuclear weapon. And these container ships have thousands of unmarked, well, they're marked, but like, that's where our headphones are. That's where our ball caps come in. They're coming in from China. That's where my shirt comes in on these big container ships. And all of a sudden, I'm chatting with my buddy at Lawrence Livermore Labs. It's one of our national laboratories, and he's a lot smarter than I am. Thank you, Dr. Steve McLaren. Thank you, Dr. Steve McLaren. And here's why. Between him and me, mostly him, we're talking on these secret phones with this data that we're getting from the sea marshals and from the FBI flying out to this cargo ship. And we got to decide now, if you stop the nuclear bomb, that's important. That's a big deal, and you make the news. If you stop the ship, you don't make the news, but the shipping company gets very upset. Why are you holding up all these television and all these microwave ovens and all these internet routers? Okay. And if you get it wrong, and there's a bunch of ways to get it wrong. And what we figured out is the test kits, and we have some test radioactivity to test our Geiger counters. We have other things in Geiger counters. But the point is, we lost one of our test kits and got broken. So all of a sudden, envision this very, very tiny amount of radioactivity used as a test calibration device is now lost on the ship. And so the entire ship smells like nuclear weapon, to abbreviate this, right? And my job is to say, you know what? This doesn't look like a weapon. This looks like an instrumentation issue. And then to find out a couple hours later, it's an instrumentation issue. And so we wound up, we slowed the ship for a couple hours, but she was allowed to come in, drop off her stuff, and whatever shirt that you're wearing, or the microwave oven, or the microphone that Roger's talking now, it arrived safely. So those
are
my
Yeti.
Oh, if you're drinking from the Blue Yeti, absolutely. So those are my two contributions to the post 9/11 world: help Marines stay safe and to stop nuclear weapons from, and by the way, there's a bunch of coasties, I want to say this, Coast Guardsmen and Coast Guardswomen doing this all the time and doing this for decades. They are keeping things safe. You just, as a nuke, you don't want to be in the news with your nuclear weapons. You don't want to be in the news.
Good news, right?
No nuke is good news, right? And for the coasties, like, no ship hitting a bridge is good news. No ship running around a canal is good news. No smuggled in nuclear weapon is good news. They've been, for decades, we've kept that peace. So when I wasn't recruiting, that was most of my time, I was doing a handful of 9/11 work. What happened differently was, after enough recruiting and hiring people, I got promoted, which is rare. I wouldn't say that recruiting is a super career enhancing job in the long term. Good recruiters will usually pick up an additional stripe. Great job, go back to work. And recruiting is good if you want to go somewhere where there are Americans to recruit. Specifically, like if you come out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and you're in the Marine Corps, the only way you're going to get stationed in Albuquerque is probably if you're going to do recruiting.
Hometown recruiting.
Hometown recruiting. I mean, if it's your high school, if it's your junior college, if it's your place of worship or your local sports team, you can have a little bit more skin in the game. Sounds good. They wound up promoting me, and they said, now you're going to go to command. So now all of a sudden, after all that time where I could have my several feelings, and by feelings, most of us have particular feelings about our commander. Now all of a sudden, you look to your left, you look to your right, and it's like, oh, I'm the guy. For a very brief amount of time in your military career, the buck will stop with you. right?
Yep.
And it is quite a mantle of command to do that. And what surprised me is they sent me to Tucson, Arizona, which is where I'm recording this here. I didn't think there was any Navy in Tucson. I was that ignorant. But there's a bunch of Navy in Tucson, and there's a bunch of Navy reservists in Tucson. There's a Navy Reserve Center in a local town near you. Every state has at least one. There's two in Arizona, one in Phoenix, one in Tucson. So they sent me to go command the Navy Reserve Center in Tucson, Arizona. And now I have cops and teachers and firemen and small businessmen and women and entrepreneurs and volunteers. And 1 week a month, they're going to show up. 2 weeks a year, they're going to do some professional training. But mostly, I am sending them to Afghanistan. I am sending them to Iraq. And I usually have a spouse or significant other or several children who are nervous that mommy or daddy or brother or sister or daughter and son is down in harm's way somewhere. And it's one thing to be the submariner off the coast where I'll never tell you doing port stuff on deployment, right? And I'm glad that I had significant amount of deployment experience to understand what that felt on the pointy end. What I
Yeah.
didn't understand is what it feels like on the non-pointy end for all those people who
Yeah.
they're not getting any gouge in where their sailor is. They're not getting any info on what their marine is doing, and that's all on us, right? So, and I'm delighted that my spouse is a marriage therapist. I have a lot to learn about that, and a family therapist. You learn a lot how to support all those people who are not deploying.
Yeah.
And that's where we come to the stories where some of them don't make it. And I lost 3 sailors on my watch. And that's 3 too many, right? I wish I could have them all back. And you can't. And their spouses can't. And, these things happen. I'm not happy about it. But when you take that crisp folded flag and it's going to mama, and that dirt hits the coffin, and everybody is very emotional, and understandably so. It's like, what can I do to not be emotional? Like the one, she's holding on to me tight. I'm going to let her have this flag, but very gently. One constant, one stable, one very like metronome, tick, tick, tick. I'm going to give you one moment of solemnity in this sea of emotion for this brief. Well, it's brief for me. It's not brief for me because I'm still talking about it. It lasts forever, right? And you guys understand. You've been there, and that's what I'm doing in 9/11. I'm very far away from that fighting for that particular line of combat, but it feels very close when they come home, or parts of them come home, or they don't come home at all. And that's there's no room for embellishment. You get it. Your viewers get it. I get it.
Yeah. You mentioned during the break, you mentioned survivor guilt, which Dan would agree is certainly a real thing, and it's a recurring topic on this show for every service, every generation. So tell us a little bit about your journey with that.
When you're standing there, or you're all in one piece, or you think you're in one piece, or at least these things work, but your buddies doesn't, or at least you can see, or your viewers can see and hear me now, and your buddy can't. And you can't figure out, and you still can't figure out why him and not me. And in my case, this happens twice. In 2005, after I've left the USS San Francisco, this submarine runs aground. You won't remember the details, but you'll probably cut to a picture here now and you say, oh yeah, I remember that picture. It's probably the picture of a submarine with a huge dent in her because she runs at full speed to an underground sea mountain. Now, credit to a lot of the ship and credit for the ship's construction, she survived. So we don't lose the ship, which if you're going as fast as you can in a car and you hit something head on, or you're going as fast as you can in a plane and you hit something head on, you are probably not coming back. You're probably in that flag folded category that I discussed. However, this nuclear submarine survives, and she is limped back home on the surface, but we lose a sailor. We lose a machinist mate in the back of the submarine, not to mention the lacerations and the broken bones and the cuts and the bruises going all fast. And all of a sudden, you come to a dead stop. Some of us are wearing seatbelts on that ship. Some of us are not, because we got to be up and about and moving stuff around. And the survivor's guilt part to me, which of course is when somebody else gets hurt, but not you can't figure out. I ran the ship that hard, that fast, that deep, over the exact same amount of water, over the exact same diligent in the charts. And I'm not here to micromanage or second guess how the Department of the Navy ran her investigation. Some people were held accountable. Some charts didn't have this on the chart. Other people said this is brown water. I'm not here to take a judgment of that. I'm not here to throw people under the bus. You can read through everything that the Navy investigated. But suffice to say, the captain will go down with their ship, and someone is always accountable in our line of work, right, for the actions taken or not taken in this case. And I can't figure out, and I still can't, why it wasn't me. I've gone over that deep water, and full disclosure, I didn't always pay as much attention as I could have. I didn't make a list, check it twice, check it thrice, 3 times. Why? Because that wasn't in the line of work when I was doing it. You made it once, and you checked it twice. But if I had checked it 3 times and found this over here, would it have been me? Would it not been me? I'm still here standing, and I can't figure it out. I also can't figure it out why somebody who trains me and teaches me well and how to emergency surface that vessel. Remember, if you take a submarine and make it very light in the nose and very light in the rear, if you put air in there, she's coming up fast. And when that happens and we sink that Japanese fishing trawler off the coast of Oahu, I've given that order. I've given that command. I've run that equipment in an identical submarine, and I've done it a lot without looking up, check it twice, check it thrice. Hey, is there anybody up there? Now we do that. Now we've, as you know, in most of our line of work, our safety regulations are written in blood. When somebody dies or when a lot of taxpayer money is lost, we change the rules. We make it more restrained. All right. But in my days of bringing a ship up quickly, or in my days of going fast underwater, none of those safeguards, extra safeguards, were there. And there are people who are dead, and it's not me, and but for the grace of God, or how you would explain that. And I can't square that circle. I've got a good life. I've got a wonderful spouse. I got great kids. I got most of my health. Like many other veterans, I have my service disability because I really thought I was rough and tough and indestructible when I was a teenager. And it turned out this job can be kind of hard on you. And the VA said, hey, maybe you ought to slow down a little bit there. Okay, I get that part, but I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm here, and I know people who aren't, and that it's heavy on you. Yeah. You're grateful, but you feel ashamed of the gratitude of each breath that you can take that someone can't, and it doesn't. Each bite that you take, each sip that you drink, that you're thinking someone's not doing it. Maybe you should savor that and savor that life, but I can't do that. I can't fully embrace all that element of humanity, knowing the choices I made and owing the fog of war means that someone else didn't come home, and I'm just here speaking in front of you and your viewers. I can't, for all the therapy I've gone through, it doesn't go away. And for me, it gets older. The details get duller, but that guilt persists. And I'm just going to have to live with it. I got a good support system. We talked earlier that if I've sought help when I need it. And if I want more, I can go get more. And when I volunteer with some of the volunteer groups I do, I am very generous of my time. And if it's over my head, I know the right people that I can go to, right? There's not enough times where we say, I need help on the inside. I'm not okay. And it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And to get the help that is there. It is free for the viewers. Most of it's confidential. And the hardest thing I had was actually saying, hey, I'm not hurt. I didn't die. I don't need help. I could use a little help. And I feel a little more whole. That hole is never going to be fully closed, but it's a little less jagged when I spend some time with professionals to help me understand the randomness and the chaos of war, and your viewers get it.
When When did you decide to hang it up?
For most of us, you know when you know. And in my particular case, after I went to your command, nobody gets to stay in command forever. I know there's like there's a Jean-Luc Picard or whatever your favorite TV show is with some military person. You watch MASH, they're like, yeah, person's been the CEO for a long time. We know that's not how it works. The monitor or the detailer, HR people, they're going to slice you around. I
Yep.
go to DC. That's my tour. And in my particular case, I have two children. They're pretty grown now, but at the time, one of them was what we call a special needs family. And a special needs family is where there's some medical special need which is difficult to accommodate. Example, if you have somebody who needs kidney dialysis or someone who needs a heart transplant. In my particular case, one of my two children is diagnosed with autism. And autism is a lifelong neurological condition where people are wired differently in their brain with their perception and their behavior. It is a neurotypicality for most of us, but some of us are atypical. In my particular case, I wasn't able to reconcile staying in uniform and maintaining a priority for my kids' therapy. And there's many different types of therapy that people can obtain. And we said, you know what? I've done this enough when you know it's time to go. And it's okay. Promotion board, don't pick me. Go pick someone else. I've got enough time. Let's go home. And so we, my spouse and I hung it up after 24 years, had a good ceremony, had our good people, and moved on to phase two, right? I live here in Tucson as a retiree, and most of my time is spent volunteering with other veterans groups. In my particular case, I found out after I took the uniform off, something was missing. I think a lot of your viewers could feel the same way. It's not the same. You can call up your buddies from the unit, but they're rolling. You can call up your buddies from the boat, but the boat is gone. They're out on op. Fortunately, there's a bunch of ways you can contribute. You can either give back, you can take, you can do both. And whether it's my veteran motorcycle riding group or my veteran musicians group where I teach people to play instruments, or it's my volunteering work for the Guard and Reserve, or it's the Tucson veterans serving veterans. We're going to survey our homeless veterans in Tucson, and then we're going to bring them off the street. We're going to give them a shave, give them a haircut, feed their dog, take care of their dental issues, convene veteran court, right? The judge, prosecution, defense, they're all veterans. Can we dismiss those small infractions in your record? Can we get you a job? Maybe janitorial, maybe service, maybe, hourly security. Most of my time when I'm not dedicated to my family or keeping this house, up and upright, I'm giving back in some part of the community. And it doesn't take me long when I walk into these groups or put on some other uniform. It's got a military affiliation to it that the lingo comes back. The inappropriate language that doesn't belong on this show and probably never really belonged in the Navy
I don't know
anyhow.
what you mean.
Yeah, it's like, oh, he's talking like a sailor again. I promised my wife I wouldn't do that, and I don't do that in front of the wife and kids. But some of these people, that's the only language that they know. It's anyhow that's what I've done post military. The uniform's off, but I'm still serving because it's a part of me. I don't have to explain it to my civilian spouse. She, I'm happy that she accommodates it. Neither of my kids expresses any interest in joining the military. I know you asked how many generations. I will be the last of my generation unless my kids have kids and they choose to sign up. And that's okay, right? For some of you who are thinking, you're going to play lacrosse because I played lacrosse, said some parent to some traumatized child who maybe doesn't like lacrosse. It's okay that my military kids don't go military themselves. It's not a negative reflection on our service or what I do. They want to, it'd be different if all they want to do is sit and play video games, which honestly, sometimes that's what I want to do, right? They want to do other stuff. That's right. And good on them. So I'll be the last for this generation, but maybe 3 generations is enough. Maybe they can enjoy those fruits of liberties. I spent a lot of my time finishing up the Cold War or dealing with 9/11. We were fighting a lot in those discussions. And as the time we're recording this right now, we may or may not go up and go fight again. I don't know. But at this moment right now, where we got people on deployment, we always have people on deployment, where we're dropping some bombs, but not huge a lot of bombs. I'm appreciative for all that we've done to at least give us that option.
Yep.
Maybe you don't have to always be bombing everybody all the time. And the stuff that you, Dan, that you, Roger, and that I did, and all of your other viewers watching, there's some good to come out of it. And if my kids have the opportunity to say, I don't want to serve, and they're not going to get drafted, even though they could, and they're not going to get pulled out of the Russian gulag and sent on the Ukrainian front lines, because that's what the Russians are doing. You know, if the blessings of liberty are exactly that, yep, you know, it wouldn't be a good tracer burnout if Roger's not pulling some reference off the shelf, right? That's the blessings of liberty. That's what we do when we support, uphold, and defend. And good on the generation for at least having that opportunity. And maybe the kids will watch this someday and say, "What do you do in the war, Daddy?" Well, you know what? Let's watch them tracer burnout. And you can.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we do this. So I'm going to ask a couple pop culture questions, and then Dan can.
No, I didn't do good last time with that carbon rod stuff.
No, this will be up your alley.
All right, maybe.
Nintendo Entertainment System. Did you ever play the Secret Service?
No.
That was one of my favorite Nintendo games. It was a submarine game. It was a World War II submarine game. You were obviously the Americans, not the filthy Japanese. And you would run silent, run deep, and you would have to avoid. But it was a strategy game and an action game. But don't think like arcade style. I mean, it wasn't corny. It was pretty serious.
I will tell you, I've been on one Japanese submarine, and I've been to Japan a lot, and their submarines are anything but filthy. They are spotless. Like, one people who can clean better than we can is the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force. Very impressed with their level of cleanliness.
Okay. So you did not play the Secret Service on the Nintendo.
All right, so I'm 0 for 1.
Okay, next. What is the best submarine movie? And you can define best. You can define.
No worries. I'm going with Run Silent, Run Deep. And this is older than most of yours. It's older than me. It's older than y'all. You're probably thinking I was going to come up with something more modern. And
Das Boot?
Right. Das Boot isn't the best because let's talk about Das Boot, because when any submariner watch the hairs on my head and the hairs on, at least I got hair on my head, right? The hairs on my arms are starting to stand up right now when you mention Das Boot. It's hard to see this on this camera, but I've got that chill in my spine thinking some of those things. Das Boot very realistically describes that water coming in the people tank for where I talked about earlier. I was absolutely terrified. You know, it was like that moment, I'm going to die. And that doesn't make it the best. That makes it the most realistic. That makes it the most dramatic. That makes it super scary to me. But, you know, that's not why I go to movies. Some of your viewers, that's called a horror movie, right? Das Boot is a horror movie for we submariners. And I don't like jump scares. Maybe you like those jump scare, scary movie stuff. I don't. I watch this with the lights on and not in the dark. Run Silent, Run Deep is entertainment. I am entertained by the grit and the actors who never got to meet each other, but they're on completely opposite sides of the world. And that's a high bar in Run Silent, Run Deep to have that level
that's an
of
awesome
engagement.
movie. It really is.
Okay, so I'm like 1 for 2. Can I get over 500?
So is U571 at least in the conversation?
Absolutely. Okay. But remember, with that movie, we're telling a good story, but we're using some A-list Hollywood actors and one rock star, good on him, you know, show some acting chops, and we're gonna make a lot of this about the people, specifically the men, and good on a lot of the acting. The Run Silent, Run Deep people doing this, it's a little bit more Shakespearean actors from the stage. It's going to be more about the setting and the people. It's a personal idea, but I do like the storytelling from U571. And if you're going to shoot stuff modern, you might as well use modern people.
Yeah. Well, Crimson Tide and Hunt for Red October would have also been acceptable answers, but I'm willing to wager that at no point in your career did you ever have a Soviet sub-captain who mysteriously had a Scottish accent for some reason.
No, if they have a Russian accent, I better hope they passed all that security clearance polygraph stuff that we already asked. Although I have wonderfully recruited, second generation and American citizens from Russia, and they have been and I especially love to put them in our intelligence services and our linguist services, and they're very, very helpful. They're making some great contributions for which I can't tell you anymore, but I am, like they said it better in Hamilton, right? Immigrants get the job done. These are great Americans who just want to wear the cloth in their new nation, including the
Yeah.
Russian Americans.
Well, Dan, one last point, and then I'll hand it off to you, brother. I've jumped out of a lot of airplanes. I've driven up and down IED alleys and been blown up and shot at a lot. And there's a lot of stuff that I've done that's pretty scary. But there's nothing more terrifying to me than being in a steel tube underneath the surface of the water. So God bless you, man. No, thank
God
you.
bless the men and the women of the submarine force.
All right, Dan, it's all you, brother.
Okay. Two questions. First, do you think that your career would have been different, like you would have chosen to stay in versus getting out and then going into the reserves? Do you think it would have been different if you had stayed along the submarine career path?
Absolutely, and rightfully so. When we have the top officer in the Navy, that's called the Chief of Naval Operations. They are an operator, been working on the ships all their time. When we have someone at the top of the Air Force, that's the Chief of Staff. They've been flying airplanes probably for their entire career. We don't have someone running the Navy who is the top recruiter. We don't have someone running the Army who is the top orthodontist. Orthodontia is important. Recruiting is important. But remember, we blow stuff up or threaten to blow people up. And it is for this reason that our nation keeps us and pays us with those taxpayer dollars and instills special trust and confidence. So if I had stayed in those submarines, I probably had a lot more career mobility, and rightfully so. If you are a warfighter, your job is up or out. We'll get you an orthodontist. We'll get you a recruiter if your cousin wants to join. But if you're going to stay in a sub or stay flying the planes or stay in infantry, the more time you spend at that pointy end of the stick, the more knowledge you get with that intimate contact with the enemy, and the greater rights and responsibilities commensurate you would have in all those stripes you can put on the side or those stars you can put on your shoulders. And that's how it would be. I will say that everybody gets to make their own personal choice. For me, enough is enough for me. And every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman, Guardian, they got to make their own decision. Fortunately, we make it pretty easy for them. Do you want to stay? Here's what you got to do. Do you want to go? Here's the door. We'll help you do it, and hopefully get you some help on the way out.
Okay. So from being a 17-year-old goofball that just wants to go explore underwater, all the way up to being a nuclear fusion tech, learning about the sparky, circly, circly, no boom good, to presenting those flags. If you could go back, would you do it all again?
Yes. It's worth it. And I have to tell myself as that 17-year-old, hey, a little less fun, a little more academics, because preschool isn't fun. A little more time checking those charts, check them twice, check those thrice, because survivor guilt sucks. Hey, future Rusty, you're gonna regret not taking that extra little bit of safety and precaution so people don't almost die. And if they do, it's gonna be your fault. And they'll joke about it later, but they'll blame you on it now. Yeah, I would do it all over again. But there's a lot of vegetables to eat to get that dessert. And every Marine that sticks their feet on those yellow footprints, hopefully they know that. Oh my God, what have I got myself into? Keep those feet on those footprints. They're there for a reason. Someone was there before you. Someone will be there after you. Same type of idea. I would do it again, and maybe take a little bit more time getting it right instead of having as much fun, so I wouldn't have as many scary stories that hopefully were moderately entertaining for your viewers. I wish I were a more boring interviewer for all the stories I have to say.
No, you are good to go. Of all the submariners in Arizona, you're by far the best.
Oh, they're like
Submariner.
There you go. Yeah, finish where we started.
Now, one last thing before we let you go, or at least one last thing from me anyway. You said that you had a, what did you call it, a zero event or zero defect? There were no
a,
nuclear
a,
incidents.
a zero defect mentality. And by the way,
Zero
I don't
defect.
have a very good zero defect mentality. I would say that Navy nuclear power has a
Yeah,
zero defect mentality, and rightfully so. Let's not
yeah,
have anything go wrong.
and that is awesome. However, would you really be able to tell us if something did go wrong? Would you?
Here's where the press conference would go wrong. You could have someone saying all this stuff that doesn't match and say, what about this Geiger counter reading that's reading 57.35? How do you explain that? Which is what every Soviet engineer had to explain after Chernobyl, which is what
Chernobyl, yeah.
every Japanese safety engineer had to explain, and rightfully so, after Fukushima, which a couple days after 3 Mile Island, the Americans are saying, hey, you know what? We'd have to say. So when the lid is blowing off, or when the water's too warm, or in The Simpsons, when you have that three-eyed fish, you can only be so non-communicado or comical before someone's got to put two and two together. In this case, keep the two and two equaling four. Keep the hot rocks where they belong, because that's how you get your Sparky without Blinky the fish.
Fair enough. Well, hey, brother, we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Dan, Roger, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for giving me your time, and I hope your viewers understand a little bit more about the silent service.
Thank you.
Awesome, man. One white whale down.
Call me Ishmael.
All right, Dan, we finally caught our unicorn or landed our white whale, or I don't know. We're going to start mixing metaphors here in a moment.
Well, I think white whale is more appropriate given he was a Navy man.
Was he a Captain Ahab?
No,
If he was, he wouldn't be able to tell us, right?
He said call him Ishmael. So
He did. He did. So yeah, we finally got a submariner on the episode. I did make that mistake at the very end again. It's a tough one to break. So really glad we got him on the show. Again, we've never met in person. We just kind of reached out and asked him if he'd be interested, and he was. So thanks, Rusty, for letting us two oafs intrude into your life. But I'll hand it off to you, Dan. What did you think?
as a land dweller,
Landlubber, yes.
that was fascinating stuff, man. I mean, I had so many questions
Me too,
about
man.
about everything to do with a sub down there. One of the things that I found really interesting, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but the way he talked about like their deployment cycles not being thought of in days or weeks, but following it by a meal schedule, because
We did
you're
that
down
in
there on
Afghanistan.
artificial light, on
Yeah.
recycled air. I mean, you have a clock, but you can't tell if it's day or night outside. You're tens of thousands of feet below the surface of the water, and just thinking about it, like, you know, 6 more pizza days, or whatever he said, until you come home. I hadn't really thought
Yeah.
about it like that before.
I mean, we had you can't compare, being up on the surface versus being below. But I mean, that we started thinking in our deployments and steak and lobster nights, like, yeah.
I was never anywhere where steak and lobster was available.
Well, it wasn't very good steak or lobster, but it was passable. You're making it sound like I was at the Ritz. Okay.
Yes, the Ritz Ramadi.
Yeah, the Ritz in Fob Salerno in Kaust. Yes. Okay. So yeah.
Salerno was
Uh,
definitely an upgrade from some of the places that I was.
well, yeah, I ended up leaving Salerno after too long, and it was a downgrade. Okay, so I had a lot of questions that I wanted to ask him as well. Most of them are technical in nature,
Yeah,
and I have to take into consideration that might not be as interesting to the audience as it is to
yeah.
you and myself. Because I even asked him several questions during the break that it won't make it into the episode. But we got into the second half a little bit more human interest as far
Yeah.
as his personal story and all that. So what did you think about that?
it's we've talked about survivor guilt plenty on this show, but it's a very real thing, and I mean it's a lifetime thing. But
Yeah.
people think of survivor's guilt, and by people I mean like the general populace. They think of survivor's guilt as the one guy out of a fire team or a squad that that came back and everybody else died, and they think of that one surviving member having survivor's guilt, which obviously that person is going to. But that sense of survivor's guilt is not the only one out there.
Correct.
Survivor's guilt takes a lot of forms, just like post traumatic stress. There's a lot of different ways that it comes about. So it's good to get a different, because I mean we talked with our Vietnam vets about some of their survivor's guilt, and obviously their stuff comes from more of the direct action um, stuff. So it's good to get um, like Rusty's or even Jessica Guidon and some of the things that she went through. A different window into that guilt complex.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as a leader, did I train my people
Yeah,
enough, or was sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, right? Was I, I think he may have kind of tapped on some of this, but
yeah,
was I just lucky?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
I like what he's doing with his volunteer work. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, very
he
very
he
active
rattled
too.
off so many different things, and uh, I'm sure that there are probably some organizations that he belongs to that we didn't even touch on, but he was just rattling off all the different ways where he volunteers his time to help veterans in legal matters or housing matters or job matters, all these different teaching music. I mean, so many different things, man. And I love to see that. I love to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've made a friend, another friend. So
Well, you need as many
Rust,
as you can get.
that's true. So Rusty, we appreciate you coming on the show again and
Yeah.
sharing your story with us to the extent that you could.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is good for a lot of different ways. I mean, you remember when we talked to Cody Bumpus, he was our first Coastie that we talked to. And I think
Mhm.
that gave us the groundwork for when we talked to Chris Johnston. We had a better understanding of what sort of coasty questions to ask. So
Yeah.
now, in the future, when we get another submariner, since we know that that's the appropriate title now we
One
have a
ping.
better now we have a better base of knowledge
Yeah.
to ask more questions off of.
And what about Space Guardians? Are you
Not real,
comfortable with?
not
Not
real.
okay.
It's
Not
not
real.
real until we actually talk to one.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, Dan, do you have any parting shots on Rusty?
I think the last thing that I would say, and we didn't really get into this that much, um, but yes, we've talked about this before, is that when it's time. You know when your time has come where you're just like, you know what, I'm out, I'm done. But he came to that decision not just because he knew, he had that feeling like, my time in uniform is over, but then also playing or using that feeling coupled with his family stuff and then getting
Yeah.
together with his spouse and them having that talk and making the decision together. I think that's important. I think
Yeah.
it's not really something that we talk to a lot of our guests about, but especially if you are married, um, I think that's an important talk to have
Yeah.
before you make a massive pivot in direction.
Yeah.
So yeah, good on him and his
Yeah.
wife for having that talk beforehand.
Yeah. I mean that's very similar situation to what we had. So perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Free fire time. Welcome to the free fire area. he even mentioned this concept in his discussion tonight, so I'm kind of jumping off of that. But a bucket list. So first, define what it is, and then just share with us a few things that you have on your bucket list, or they could be things that you've already scratched off. That's fair game too. But first, define it, and then give us just a couple.
I guess a bucket list is really just a list of things that you want to go, things you want to do, books you want to read, places you want to visit, people you'd like to meet, you know, things like that you want to do before you're shuffled off this mortal coil.
Before you kick the bucket.
Yes. I have been, and I'm sure that you feel the same in many ways in this regard. Growing up in a military family, I got to go a lot of really cool places growing up, and I've seen a lot of cool things that I think that many people would have on their bucket list. So things like going to the pyramids, or going up to the top of the Eiffel Tower, or things like that. I've already done it. I was talking with my mom earlier this afternoon, and we were talking about a time we went to go see some Tunisian pottery makers, and we ended up getting stuck in a sewage ditch for hours and hours and hours. That was an awful experience, but now being older, we can chuckle about it. So I've gotten to go a lot of amazing places. There are still plenty of places that I would like to go. I would love to go to Mongolia. I would love to go horseback riding on the steppes where, Genghis Khan or the other
Kublai Khan,
Khans,
yeah.
Did the same thing, and the area really hasn't changed that much. I mean, you go to the Alamo, and the Alamo is completely surrounded by high-rise buildings, and there's a Ripley's, believe it or not, strip mall on the other side of it. I mean, it's bizarre, right? But if you
It's
go to
very
some
American,
place,
by the way. Yeah.
if you go to some place, in the Mongolian steppes and ride a horse, it's going to look exactly the same way it did when the Mongol hordes were mounting up to take over Europe. So
Will you sleep in a yurt and do some of the throat singing and drink some of that yak milk alcohol?
Fermented yak milk. Yes, I've actually had that. I've worked with some Mongolians. They were interesting people.
That's charitable. Yes.
Yeah, they were good guys, but I didn't enjoy that at all. But
Genghis, they were not. Or Gengis, if you're pretentious.
But pretty much everything that I would like to do is going to be, history related somehow, because I am such a nerd. I have not been to Mount Rushmore. I would love to go. I have not been back to New York City since 9/11. The last time I was in New York City was probably about two months before 9/11.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I would like to go back and see the monument there at Ground Zero. I would actually like to go back to Egypt. I'd like to go back to Egypt and Israel and Jordan. Petra and Jerash are awesome in Jordan, where Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where they're going through the little canyon, and then all of a sudden there's the giant temple. That's
follow me. I know the way.
Yeah, that's Petra. It
got
is
lost in his own museum.
It is so cool, and I would absolutely love to go back.
That's our second Sean Connery reference of the evening.
Well, it's your second Sean Connery reference.
I know. One
but
thing.
but there's a lot of places in Europe that I would still like to go that exclude all of France. Um, yeah,
Francistan.
yeah, Francistan. Plenty of places in England, Ireland, Scotland that I would like to go. I did. There's a lot of really cool places in Spain and Portugal that I would love to go to. Um, yeah, still oh, go. There are, I think it's three. There are three Spanish cities that are actually in Morocco, but they are Spanish, and it's an old leftover from before
The
World War II,
Reconquista? Yeah.
and like literally the cities are it. Like you leave the city limits, and then you're in Morocco. But it's wild. But I would love to go and see that because there's so much cool history over there. Um, yeah, that is most of my bucket list stuff. Is all like places I would like to go and things that I would like to see that are history related. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as for me, I'm very, very similar. There's a similar list as you. I've never been to the pyramids, so that would be on towards the top. I know most of the wonders of the ancient world are gone. I've trodden the area that I'm pretty sure the Hanging Gardens was. Couldn't prove that, but archaeologists still argue over that. But I'm pretty sure I've
yeah,
been there. Um, there's a couple things that I've done or experienced that were not on my bucket list, but in retrospect, when I look back, I'm like, those definitely would have been had I known how cool they were before I went to go see them. So, for example, when I was in Sri Lanka, there's a big it's called Sigiriya, which is Sinhalese for the Lion Rock or Rock of the Lion or whatever, and it's this just huge jungle, and just sticking straight out of the jungle is this massive, completely out of place, enormous rock. And so in ancient times, there was a stronghold, of course, that it was turned into a military fortification because why not? And there's this small palace that had been put on top of it, and then there's all these cool areas that you can climb up these Indiana Jones type, rope ladders, and there's these old frescoes that they're not exposed to the sun, and they don't allow flash photography, but you can kind of go
yeah.
on these little rope bridges and definitely feel like indie when you're looking at these old frescoes and stuff like that. So Sigiriya was pretty amazing. Um, yeah, there's some stuff I'd love to go see some areas of Japan, and I've been to Japan, but it was during military stuff, and it wasn't fun or
It's not the same when you're there in an official capacity.
not. It was all business while I was there. So yeah, there's some areas of Japan I'd love to see. There's some areas of, dare I say, Persia that I would love to see. Hopefully in the coming years and decades, things will kind of loosen up,
Yeah,
because there's areas of China and Persia that I would love to see, but I refuse to go there if evil psychos are running their governments. So yeah, and then to top it off, really just the ancient Med. There's some areas of
yeah.
Greece that I would love to see, and to a lesser extent some of the old Roman stuff, but mostly the Greek stuff is what I want to see.
I would love to. I mean, obviously the Colossus isn't there anymore, but I would love to go to Rhodes.
Yeah,
I think that'd be pretty cool. I would love to go back to Cyprus.
yeah.
I'd love to go to Crete and
And
see
be a
where the
Cretan.
see where the
The
Nazi
labyrinth.
the Nazi the Nazis' one singular airborne operation absolutely failed, and so
Yeah,
they swore it off to never do airborne
yeah,
ops again.
yeah. There's some new world stuff I'd like to see too. Like I'd like to see Machu Picchu and some of there's some stuff down in I
Oh yeah,
I'd like to see Tenochtitlan.
oh
Just
yeah, dude, that'd be
the
awesome.
Aztec stuff is fascinating to me for probably all the wrong reasons, but there's some really cool
Oh yeah,
Mesoamerican
they
stuff I'd
are.
like to see.
What's the stuff called? Is it Mylar? Is that what it is? They're basically using these drones with this.
Mylar is this metallic material they make kid birthday balloons out of.
No, it's something like that. But they use these drones and they fly over and they use basically like a radar or something to scope all these deep forests in the Amazon and in Central America and things like that. And when they get the imagery back, they feed it into a computer. The computer strips away all the vegetation, and they can actually find these old ancient cities that have been buried by the jungle for centuries.
I mean, that
I
sounds
would
like a
I would
useful
love to see
AI
that.
tool. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would absolutely love to see stuff like that, man. So cool.
Yeah, for sure.
And the food. So
yeah, of course, no one will be surprised that you and I totally took this in an ancient history direction. So,
all right, well then, what is one more modern? I said Mount Rushmore. I haven't been there, and I have been to the Eiffel Tower, and I have been to the Statue of Liberty. So, what is
I'd love to go
something?
to I'd love to go to Glacier National Park. I mean, that's not a structure, but that one's when I say local, I mean in the continental United States. Does that count?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Other bucket list items. I want to walk my 3 daughters down the aisle.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
Okay. If they'll have me.
Well, they know that they can always ask me if they refuse you. So,
oh man,
except one, and she knows who she is.
She knows who she is. Okay. On that cheery note, we appreciate everybody listening, watching, listening. We put a lot of effort into these shows, so we always appreciate people who dedicate the time and spend a few hours with us every other week. So please reach out to us on social media. We love the feedback. Please download, follow the show, share it. Sharing really helps feed the algorithm, which helps get the show out. So just do anything you can to interact with the show. We appreciate. Dan, take us out.
Yeah, and if you simply enjoyed the one episode that you've listened to, go ahead and give us a rating, a review. All that stuff really helps. And remember, your service matters.
These days, we use what's called a photonics mask, which is instead of using one eyepiece with a lot of optics, let's just have some cameras so you can get a 360 view. So we're not reliant on one eyeball of one human looking at the entire surface of the water. Because for a submarine going blind up to the surface, that's a really dangerous evolution. What happens if there's an oil tanker up there? What happens if there's a trawler up there? We call this the small ship, big ocean theory. And in general, there's a lot of ocean out there. However, you don't want to take that chance. There have been some times where we have bumped into stuff. There have been a time, in my recollection, off the coast of Pearl Harbor, where a United States submarine surfaced with their emergency blow and sank a Japanese trawler. And that was tragic.